The Buffalo Bills have made a lot of changes this offseason. There's a new head coach. There are new coordinators. There's a new defense. There's a new attitude. There's a new stadium. And now there's a new flagship radio station. And that point is what I'm here to talk about today on the Ralph Rant. Let's go.
Welcome to the Ralph Rant, your source for hard-hitting Buffalo Bills takes. Now, here's your host of the Ralph Rant, that veteran watcher of generations of Bills teams, the prophet who predicted Josh Allen's greatness, that opinionated so-and-so you've walked out on parties because of, the Ralph.
Welcome to the Ralph Rant. I am your host, the Ralph. Thank you ever so much for being here. Well, I was right in the middle of putting together my schedule release video when the news came out this morning that the Buffalo Bills have moved on from WGR 550 AM as the flagship station of the team. Now, this is an interesting development because it's been 15 years that WGR has been in this position, and it's kind of surprising because if you look around the league, you find that many of the radio stations that carry the team's broadcasts have often been in place for quite some time. You often have a announcer, a game-by-game guy that's been there forever and is a legend in and of himself. Certainly just like Van Miller would have been for years and years with the Bills on whatever station it was, and largely 97 Rock for a lot of that time. So the other business reasons that could exist for this change are also reasonable. For example, WGR has for some time now, a number of years, been corporately owned by something called Odyssey. And I never liked it when that change was made because I used to listen to WGR quite a bit, tried to listen to recordings of the shows. I would call in often, get beat down on some of those calls, but certainly I enjoyed it for what it provided. But it seems to me that YouTube podcasts have largely replaced that kind of content, and many listeners have moved on from WGR, and I believe the reason for it is nothing to do with business reasons. I believe the reasons have to do with the attitude that developed at WGR, and that's what I'm here to talk about today. Now, if we want to go and look at a specific instance, everyone will point to the fact when, on the Monday morning following the 2025 NFL Draft, Brandon Beane sat on hold to speak with the morning show hosts, Jeremy White and Joe DiBiase, I believe also known as Sneaky Joe. And while he was on hold, the hosts were complaining and, to Brandon Beane's way of thinking, bitching about the fact that the Bills had not selected a wide receiver early in the draft. And Brandon Beane let them know that when he got on air. In fact, he really unloaded on them, and it was actually quite a situation. Now, a lot of folks will think that has to be the reason this actually happened, but I'm going to tell you more about WGR and things that date back a little bit farther than that, and a pattern that had developed with some of their hosts. And if you ask me, I believe WGR, in their coverage of the Buffalo Bills, developed an arrogance and a tone deafness that obviously went far enough where the Bills finally decided to make this change and take more control of the broadcasts. Now, the actual game broadcasts really won't change much. Chris Brown and Eric Wood will still be the play-by-play and analysts, respectively, for the games. The sideline reporter, though, has changed, and that is now Steve Tasker rather than Sal Capaccio. Now, I and many of you love Sal. Sal, to me, has never had sort of the arrogance and tone deafness I spoke of before with the Bills that some of the other hosts on the station have. But if you're talking about a choice between Sal Capaccio and the legendary Steve Tasker as your sideline reporter, who does have network experience and, of course, also runs or is part of, with Chris Brown, the One Bills live show that comes on daily, used to be on WGR, now it'll be 97 Rock. But certainly that change would make sense. And you can talk about the fact that this is all business reasons. and put aside maybe that Brandon Beane got upset with the hosts after the draft. But it goes back farther than that, in my opinion. You will all recall the fact that back when Sean McDermott was the coach, he used to appear on WGR at 4 p.m. Monday afternoon following a game day. It would be Tuesday, for example, if it was a Monday night game. And he would come on and speak with the afternoon hosts, Mike Shope and the Bulldog, whose actual name is Chris Parker, and they would talk with Coach about what went on during the game and how things went and so forth. And I used to listen to those religiously. I would listen to WGR every day, every afternoon, and even listen to recordings of the morning show. So I was listening to what was going on. And essentially, it got to the point where Mike Shope became insulting to Sean McDermott. And I heard this on a number of occasions. It wasn't outright insults. Maybe that's a little strong of a word, but definitely questioning the coach, questioning things such as, well, Shope was very good at saying culture doesn't matter in the locker room. And there's no such thing as momentum during a football game. I mean, really, I don't want to use the word idiocy, but it's really not recognizing what or understanding what goes on in a football game or in an NFL locker room. And you'll all recall, maybe you won't, but you'll remember if you think about it, that suddenly Sean McDermott was no longer appearing on that afternoon show, and instead moved over, and his conversations with WGR would be with Sal Capaccio on the Extra Point show, which came on after the morning show in season, and that would be about 10 in the morning, I believe, or 11, and that's when McDermott would come on and speak with Sal Capaccio on Fridays. And of course, Sal was the Bills' sideline reporter, as we mentioned, no longer in that position now. Unfortunate for him because he's been replaced essentially with Steve Tasker. And then really there's more. If you used to go and listen to the postgame shows that were often done by Shope and the Bulldog, there was negativity to the max. In fact, the entire radio station was totally down on the Bills for making the selection of Josh Allen. I believe most of them wanted Josh Rosen. I mean, there is a lack, to me, of football knowledgeability that existed with WGR that resulted in a lot of things being said that make me have to refer back to an adage that my father used to tell me all the time, and that is never attribute to treachery that which could be explained by incompetence. And I believe that's exactly what we have, because we had tone-deaf and rather unknowledgeable hosts dealing directly with the Bills. And I think the Bills got tired of it. I don't think the incident with Jeremy White and Brandon Beane was the start of it. I think that was actually the straw that broke the camel's back. And there are other things that I noted that, I used to call into the shows. I would call in the morning at times, and then more often in the afternoon when I was able to hear it. And I would get slammed around for my opinions. The hosts were arrogant. They were always negative about the Bills. There was, of course, when the Bills started winning the division every year, it got a little bit better. But the fact is that the negativity and the arrogance displayed by the hosts, especially in some of the post-game shows and even in the normal banter of the daily programs, was, to me, the reason that the Bills decided, and is the reason that the Bills decided to get rid of WGR and move on. Now, listen, there are a lot of YouTube channels out there that talk about the Bills and have different opinions about the Bills, and that is the place for it, because they are not tied to the Buffalo Bills. And for someone who is actually being paid by the Bills, and I'm sure WGR had some financial arrangement that was, they were getting paid to do the games, I'm sure, for them to not understand that you're in the position of the flagship station. And if you've got opinions about the team that are really negative, you could perhaps put them out in a more, I don't know, a less arrogant way, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I think another factor to this also, with Jeremy White being sort of the point of the most recent conflict between the Bills and the radio station, Jeremy White now appears twice a week on the Bill Squad show, which is a Locked On product, with the Locked On Bills area being Joe Marino. Now, don't get me wrong, Joe Marino is the most knowledgeable, best, and level-headed and understanding of how to present material on the Bills, even when it's criticism. He's the model. And of course, the Bills Squad show, which then also includes Bills former lineman Jerry Ostrowski, but it also includes Jeremy White as the host. And I think the Bills may have recognized that you've got 2 more hours of Jeremy White on the air, a guy that is actually part of the flagship station, but is now off doing something completely different for part of the week, where he is not under the guise and requirements of whatever the Bills might have for a flagship station, and again, can go ahead and be critical. And I believe WGR basically became, for me, the what I'm calling Debbie Downer Central. And of course, a Debbie Downer is not to call someone a girl's name, although I love the name Debbie. It's an acronym. And it stands for Drought Enhanced Buffalo Bills Insecurity Effect. And that has been what is going on with that station, I believe, for a long time. And I think the Bills decided in the house cleaning that they've done this offseason to include WGR as part of it. And I imagine that the hosts that will be doing post-game shows, pre-game coverage, and even talk shows during the week will be mindful enough to present their opinions in such a way that they're not insulting their employer in the process. And their employer, in this case, being the Buffalo Bills, who are sanctioning them to do this work. I had to get this out because, frankly, I've never really appreciated the way WGR approached the Buffalo Bills. And frankly, even to the point where if I go and look at the site when there are big things going on with the Bills and all I see are hockey stories, mostly that are poorly written. And by the way, I'm sure they don't like me now, but if you do need an editor, I'm there to help you. But aside from that, we're moving on to 97 Rock now, and it'll be interesting to hear that and interesting to see how the new team does. Again, I think the loss here is Sal Capaccio, who did not exhibit the tendencies that many of the other people at WGR did. But I'm not sad about this change, and since I don't work for the Bills or for WGR, I'm going to say what I want. So, now it's back to putting together this schedule release video. I'll have that to you shortly, but in the meantime, as always, be good, do good, God bless, and go Bills. This is the Ralph Rant. I am the Ralph, out.